One night, a little boy was in his bedroom when he saw something very scary on the wall. It was a huge shadow, and it looked like a monster. The boy got so scared that he ran to his father and said, "Dad, there's a monster in my room." The dad, who was a very brave man, wasn't scared at all. He took a candle and walked with his son back to the room. When they went back, the shadow was still there, and it looked even bigger now. But then the boy's dad did something very clever. He asked his son to stand right in front of the candlelight. And as the boy stood there, his shadow was also on the wall. And they saw that the scary monster was actually a small toy horse that was standing right next to the candle. The tiny horse had cast a huge shadow on the wall. The boy's dad smiled and said, "Do you see, my son? Many fears in life are just like this shadow. They may seem big and scary, but if you bring them into the light, you will see that they are not as big as you think." Then the boy wasn't afraid anymore, and he understood that sometimes our fears can be very silly. So the next time you feel scared, remember the boy and his dad. Just like the candle in the story, your fears will become smaller and you will become braver. Now let's think about the important lessons from the story. The first one is that sometimes our fears can make things look bigger than they are. When the boy was in his room alone, his fear made the shadow look like a huge monster. But when his dad came and brought light into the room, the monster turned out to be a small toy. This teaches us that we should not let our fears control us or make decisions for us. Instead, we should try to understand our fears and not let them grow bigger in our minds. The second lesson is that we should always face our fears. When the boy was scared, he could have stayed in his room and kept imagining scary things, or he could have run away and hid somewhere else. But instead, he did the right thing by telling his dad and bringing light into the room. When we face our fears, they become smaller and we become braver. And finally, remember that you're not alone in this world. If you ever feel scared or afraid, just reach out to someone you trust, like a parent, a teacher, or a friend. They will help you bring the light into your room and show you that your fears are not as big as they seem. So the next time you see a scary movie or hear a scary story, remember the boy and his dad. Be brave and don't let your fears control you. Because just like the shadow in the story, your fears will become smaller and you will become braver. Once upon a time, a young man came to a wise and old teacher. He said, "Master, my life is full of bitterness. Nothing makes me happy. I work, but I don't get appreciation. People fight over silly things. I feel lonely. Life is hard and it seems meaningless." The teacher listened patiently, and then he took a handful of salt and gave it to the young man. "Put this into a glass of water and drink it," he said. The young man did as told, then he spat it out immediately. "It's too salty. I can't drink it." The teacher then took the young man to a large lake. He dropped the same handful of salt into the water and said, "Now drink from the lake." The young man bent down, drank the water, and this time it tasted fresh and sweet. The teacher turned to him and said, "Life's bitterness is like this salt. It is the same for everyone. But the bitterness feels greater or smaller, depending on the vessel that holds it. If your heart is small like a glass, the bitterness will overwhelm you. But if your heart is wide like a lake, you will hardly notice it." Then the wise man said, "Go now and embrace all of life, the good and the bad. Don't try to avoid the bitterness, for that is what makes your heart grow larger. And the more you embrace, the less bitter your life will become." This story teaches us that we cannot avoid bitterness in life, but we can choose the size of our heart. The young man in the story complained that his life was full of bitterness. He felt overwhelmed by the challenges he faced and the pain he experienced. This is a common human experience. Sometimes life can feel like a cup that's already full, leaving no room for anything else but misery. However, the wise teacher in the story offered a different perspective. He showed the young man that the amount of salt, which represents the bitterness in life, is the same for everyone. What differs is the container, the size of our hearts. When we have a small heart, a little trouble can make us feel miserable. On the other hand, when our hearts are big, the same troubles become bearable. The choice, therefore, is ours. Do we want to be like the young man with a small glass heart constantly overwhelmed by life's bitterness? Or do we want to be like the wise teacher with a big lake heart, able to hold both the sweetness and the saltiness of life without being overwhelmed? The answer, of course, is to cultivate a big heart. To embrace the teachings of the wise teacher and learn to hold more, both the good and the bad, the sweet and the bitter. Only then can we truly live a full and meaningful life. That's all for today. See you next time. Once upon a time, not too long ago, there was a young man who loved to play the piano. One day while he was playing, a few of the keys broke and no longer made any sound. At first he tried to fix it, but when he couldn't, he stopped playing altogether. It seemed pointless to him to play a song that was missing some notes. He just sat there looking at the keys that no longer played, thinking to himself, what's the point? It's not perfect, so why bother? And so the piano sat there, gathering dust. One day an old musician visited him. He too loved to play the piano. When he saw the old piano, he asked if he could sit at it and play. The young man simply nodded, still annoyed that the piano wasn't in perfect condition. The old man sat down and started to play. The melody he played was beautiful, even though several of the keys didn't make a sound. The young man couldn't believe his ears. He asked, "How can you play music on a broken piano?" The old musician stopped playing, looked at the young man and asked, "Why do you think I only played a few notes?" Confused, the young man answered, "Well, those are the notes that make the song. Why would you play broken notes?" The old musician smiled and said, "Perfection is not required to create beauty. Even with broken keys, a song can still move hearts if you focus on the notes that remain." The young man couldn't help but smile back. He'd never thought of it that way before. From that day on, the young man played the piano again, and his music was more heartfelt than ever. Whenever he felt like giving up because something wasn't perfect, he remembered the old musician's words, "Focus on the notes that remain." One day after school, two boys were walking home when they saw a pair of old shoes lying by the side of the road. They belonged to a poor man who was working in the field nearby. "I have an idea," said the first boy. "Let's play a trick on him. We'll hide his shoes, and then we'll see how he reacts." The second boy shook his head. "That's cruel. Let me think of something else." Then he had an idea. "I have 2 coins. Let's put 1 coin in each shoe. That way when he puts his shoes back on, he'll feel like somebody's giving him money." "Yeah, that's a good idea," said the first boy. So they took the shoes and hid behind the bushes to wait for the man. A few minutes later, the man came to get his shoes. When he put them on, he felt something hard inside. He looked down and saw the coins. He took them out and looked around to see who was there. But the boys were really good at hiding, so he didn't see them. He fell to his knees and prayed, "Oh, thank you, kind stranger. With this money, I can buy food for my children tonight. God bless you." And he walked away. The boys stayed silent. They felt a little bad for wanting to play a trick on such a nice man. Sometimes it's more fun to be mischievous than kind. But this time, being kind made them feel better than being mischievous ever could have. This story teaches us that it's easy to laugh at people who are less fortunate than us, but it's much better to help them. We don't know what someone's life is like, so we shouldn't make fun of them. We should always be kind and respectful to everyone, because we all God's children, and we should treat each other like we want to be treated. A little bit of generosity can make someone's whole day, or even change their life. Once upon a time, there was a student who came to his teacher. He was very angry and restless. "No matter what I do," he said, "I feel troubled. My thoughts are unclear, and my heart is heavy." The teacher was a wise man. He looked at the student for a moment and then went to a table. On the table was a glass filled with dirty water. "Look at this glass," said the teacher. "What do you see?" The student looked at the glass. "It's full of mud." "The water is undrinkable," he said. The teacher nodded and placed the glass on the table. "Now, wait," he told the student. The student waited, but nothing happened. He looked at the glass again. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked. The teacher said, "Just wait." Minutes passed, and the student started to calm down. He saw that the mud at the bottom had slowly sunk, and the water above it was becoming clear. The teacher pointed at the glass and said, "Your mind is like this water. When you shake it with anger or worry, it becomes cloudy, just like this water. But if you let it rest in stillness, the clarity will return by itself." The student understood what the teacher meant. From that day on, whenever his heart was troubled, he sat quietly and let the mud settle. After a while, his mind would become calm, and the problems would seem much smaller. He could think clearly and find solutions to his problems. And so, with a peaceful mind, he lived happily ever after. The end. Now, do you know what the biggest problem of our life is? It is the problem of being unhappy. Whatever we do, we want to be happy. But why are we unhappy? Why do we have so many problems? It is all because of our mind. Our mind is like a restless ocean. It keeps moving up and down, left and right. It never rests. Because of this, we can't even rest. Do you think this is normal? Is this how we were meant to live? No. Even today, there are many people who live with a peaceful mind. They are not disturbed by anything. How do they do this? They have discovered the secret of controlling our mind. They have learned to dive deep within themselves and find the eye that is always blissful and joyful. To know how they do this, watch this video. Long ago, a wise king wanted to test the character of his people, so he had a large stone placed in the middle of the road. Then he hid nearby to observe their reactions. A little while later, some wealthy merchants came strolling along. They were important people in the kingdom, but they were too busy looking after their own interests to notice the obstruction in their path. When they saw the stone, they started complaining loudly. Hey, look at this. This stone is blocking our way. Why doesn't the king clear the road? It's an inconvenience for merchants like us to have to detour around it. We are going to be late for the emperor's ball, and who knows what kind of trouble we allocate into because of this. But as they were talking, they kept their eyes on their fancy shoes, carefully stepping around the stone so as not to soil them. None of the merchants offered to move it. After a while, a group of farmers came along. They too grumbled about the stone. It's always the same with these city folk, they said. They just go ahead and build obstacles in our path, without considering how hard it is for us poor farmers to get around. Why don't they just put up a sign saying this road is closed? Then they, too, stepped carefully around the stone and left it where it was. Finally, a poor man came along. He was an honest, hard-working fellow who earned his living selling vegetables. When he saw the stone, he thought to himself, if I don't move it, someone might trip over it and get hurt. So he put down his heavy load of vegetables and pushed with all his strength. After a lot of effort, he managed to roll the stone off the road. To his surprise, he found a small bag of gold under it. There was a note. This reward is for the one who removes the obstacle. The poor man couldn't believe his eyes. He looked around to see if there was a king or a prince hiding nearby, but he didn't see anyone. Maybe it was the reward of some other nobleman who had passed by before him and failed to move the stone. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the king's way of testing him. The point is, no one can know what opportunities await them around every corner. But those who take responsibility for the things they see and act to make things better will find hidden rewards waiting for them. This story teaches us that every obstacle hides an opportunity. While most people just complain, those who take responsibility and act are the ones who discover the hidden rewards. Two friends were arguing. They were really good friends, but they argued so fiercely that they decided to part ways. They went their separate ways and they didn't speak to each other for days. One of them was thinking about how bad his friend had treated him, how badly he had spoken to him, and he felt terrible. He took a stick of chalk and wrote on the wall of his house, "My friend betrayed me today." He wanted to let the world know how bad his friend had treated him. Days passed and the pain remained. But one day the same friend showed up at his house. He came to apologize, and when he saw what he had written on the wall, he felt even worse. The friend who had written on the wall felt terrible. So in order to make amends, he picked up a chisel and carved into a stone, "My friend saved me today." The other friend was confused. He asked, "Why did you write the bad things about me in chalk and carve the good things in stone?" And the friend replied, "Because chalk fades quickly and so should my anger. But kindness must be remembered forever, like words carved in stone." Friends, this is a very important lesson in life. We have to learn how to let go of hurts quickly, but hold on tightly to acts of kindness. When someone does something bad to us, we tend to hold on to that pain, sometimes for years and years. But we have to understand that holding on to that pain is like writing it in stone. It will always be there, and it will only hurt us. On the other hand, when someone does something kind for us, we should hold on to that as if it were gold. We should cherish it, we should value it, because that is what will bring us happiness. Not the bad things, but the good things. So my friends, let us be quick to listen, slow to speak, and even slower to anger. Let us remember the good and forgive the bad. Let us write the bad in chalk and carve the good in stone. Then, and only then, will our lives become lighter. We will not be weighed down by the hurts and the pains of the past. Instead, we will be filled with the joy and the happiness of the present moment.
Thank you.
One day, a teacher drew a long line on the blackboard. He turned to his students and asked, "Who can make this line shorter without touching it?" The class started whispering among themselves. Some said, "How can you make it shorter? You have to touch it." Others argued, "It's impossible." "It's a trick question." But one student stood up, walked up to the board, and drew an even longer line right next to it. The teacher smiled and said, "Now the first line looks shorter, doesn't it?" without being erased. The students all looked at each other, surprised. Then the teacher said, "In life, don't waste your time trying to cut others down. The best way to rise is not by making others smaller, but by making yourself bigger." The little boy pondered these words. He thought about how he could apply them to his life. He realized that instead of focusing on his own growth, he often tried to pull others down to his level. He would get angry when his friends did better than him and would feel jealous of their success. But now he understood that the only way to truly succeed was to focus on himself and not on others. He thanked the teacher for the valuable lesson and went out into the world determined to make something of himself. Years passed and the boy grew up. He became a successful man and was known throughout the land for his wisdom and kindness. People from all over came to him for advice, because they knew that he had a simple philosophy that guided him through life. Whenever he saw someone who was better than him, instead of feeling envy, he felt inspired. He realized that they could do something that he could unend that made him strive to be better. He knew that by focusing on himself and not on others, he would eventually become the best version of himself. So if you ever feel like you're falling behind, remember the boy who raced with the wind. Don't waste your time trying to pull others down. Instead, focus on growing yourself. Become bigger, better, and wiser. And when you do, you'll see that everything else will fall into place. You may even find that the things you once struggled with become easier than you ever imagined. So don't compare yourself to others. Just focus on becoming the best version of yourself and the rest will come easy. The young man visited his old teacher after many years. When he entered the house, he noticed an empty chair placed next to the teacher's desk. He found it very strange because every time he visited, the chair was always there. So he finally gathered his courage and asked, "Why do you keep this chair here? You don't even sit in it. Why not throw it away?" The teacher smiled and said, "This chair reminds me to leave space in my mind and heart. If the chair is always occupied, there will be no room for anyone new. My mind is too full of pride and my heart too full of judgment. I cannot welcome new ideas or new people." The young man thought, "How true is this? I too have so many opinions, complaints, and worries crowding my mind. There's hardly any space left for anything new." He realized that his life was like a crowded room filled with unnecessary things. He thanked the teacher and went back home. After a few weeks, the young man came back to see his teacher. And as he entered the house, he noticed that the old chair was still there. But now, there was a beautiful flower pot in the space beside it. Surprised, he asked, "I see you still have the chair here, but now there is also a flower pot. Can I ask you something?" The teacher said, "Of course, my child." "Ask me," the young man said. "You told me last week that you keep this chair to remind yourself to leave space in your mind and heart for new ideas and people. But how can we actually do that? How can we make room for new things in our lives?" The teacher smiled and said, "This is a very good question. Just like we need to water this plant every day to keep it alive in the same way. We need to make space in our minds every day to welcome new ideas and opportunities. When we water the plant, we are also removing all the dried leaves and extra branches. In the same way, we must let go of our worries, complaints, and wrong opinions. Only then can we welcome wisdom, kindness, and love into our lives." Friends, this is the story of the empty chair. This story teaches us to be open to new ideas and to make room for them in our lives. When we leave room in our hearts and minds, we allow wisdom, kindness, and new opportunities to enter. But if we fill ourselves with pride and clutter, nothing new can grow. So just like the teacher, we should keep a chair or a corner in our life empty. It will help us to welcome all the positive things that life has to offer. Once upon a time in a little shop, there were lots of clocks on the wall. They all had one job: to tell the time. All of them were good at it, too, except for one little clock. It wasn't a very old clock. But one day it stopped ticking. The other clocks whispered, "What's wrong with you? Why have you given up?" The little clock sighed and said, "I calculated. I must tick 60 times every minute. 3,600 times every hour, 86,400 times every day. That's too much. I cannot go on. The old clock next to it chuckled and said, "Don't think about the thousands of ticks ahead. Just focus on the next tick, and then the next. That's all you need." The little clock thought for a moment. It looked at the old clock and realized it was right. So it took a deep breath and started ticking again, one beat at a time. And soon it was back in rhythm, keeping time just as before. Moral of the story: don't worry about all the things that could go wrong. Just focus on the next right step, and then the next. That's all you need. Do you ever feel overwhelmed? Maybe you have lots of homework to do, or you're retrying to learn a new skill, like playing an instrument. Sometimes when we look to the future and see all the things we have to do, it can feel impossible. We may get so worried that we end up not doing anything. That's what the little clock did when it stopped ticking. It felt too overwhelmed to keep going, but the old clock was right. The little clock didn't need to think about all the ticks ahead. It just needed to focus on the next tick and then the next. When we feel overwhelmed, it helps to break things down into smaller steps. That way we don't get so worried and we can keep moving forward, one step at a time. Now I want to hear from you. What helps you when you feel overwhelmed? You can draw a picture, write a story, or even just write a few sentences. I can't wait to read your responses. Once upon a time in a classroom, there was a boy who sharpened his pencil until it was almost gone. All that was left was a tiny stub, barely an inch long. The other children began to laugh at him. "Why don't you throw it away? It's almost gone," they said. The boy just smiled and continued writing with his pencil. Even though the pencil was small, it still wrote clearly on the page. The boy didn't let the other children's laughter bother him. He knew that even a small pencil could do a great job. At the end of class, the teacher picked up the boy's pencil and looked at it. It was so small, but it had left clear words on the page. The teacher turned to the class and said, "Look at this. Even though it is small, it still serves its purpose. It teaches us that value does not depend on size or appearance, but on how well we are used." The children were quiet. They understood what the teacher meant. From that day on, they never laughed at the boy for using a small pencil. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a beautiful princess. She had everything she could possibly want: a big castle, beautiful clothes, and kind servants. But she was unhappy. One day, the princess's father, the king, announced that he would throw a huge party. "I want all the people in the kingdom to come to the party," he said. "It'll be the biggest party we have ever thrown." The princess was in charge of picking out the food for the party. She walked into the kitchen and saw all the cooks preparing lots of delicious food. There were piles of fruits and vegetables, loaves of bread and cakes. The princess was happy. She knew that all the guests would enjoy the food. As the party began, people from all over the kingdom arrived. There were nobles and servants, farmers and merchants. All the guests were there. The princess greeted them all with a big smile. The party lasted for days. There was music and dancing. The princess joined in, and soon she was having the time of her life. She forgot all about her sadness. Finally, the party was over. The princess sat on a chair, exhausted but happy. She had helped to make the biggest party in the kingdom, and she had made many new friends. As she looked around at all the smiling faces, she realized that she was truly blessed. The princess learned that happiness did not come from having everything she wanted, but from making the most of what she had. Once upon a time, there was a carpenter who was building a chair. In his box of nails, there were many shiny new nails. They were all perfect except for one. One nail was slightly bent. The carpenter picked it up, looked at it, and tried to hammer it in, but it just bent even more. "Oh no," he said. "This nail is useless." He tossed it aside and got to work on the chair. He hammered in the straight nails until he had finished. Then he stood back to admire his work. It was a beautiful chair, but he couldn't help but look at the bent nail. He thought, "I should throw that thing away. It's just trash." But then he had an idea. He picked up the nail and examined it closely. Just maybe he could use it somewhere. He went over to an old wobbly door and pushed it open. It had a loose hinge, and when he looked at it closely, he saw that the bent nail would fit perfectly into the awkward angle where a straight nail could not. With a smile, he hammered the nail into place. And wouldn't you know it, The door closed properly for the first time in years. The carpenter was so happy, thought even a bent nail has its place. From that day on, whenever he saw a bent nail, he didn't throw it away. He kept it in his box of nails, and when he needed it, he knew exactly where to find it. The carpenter in the story is a wise man. He learned that even a bent nail has its place, which means that everyone has value, even if they seem imperfect. What looks like weakness in one situation may be strength in another. Instead of discarding people, we should learn to see where each person's unique shape belongs. And remember, friends, you are not a nail. You are much more than that. You are valuable, you are loved, and you have a purpose. Don't ever forget that. Now I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been like the carpenter? Did you ever try to fix something and make it even worse? Please share your thoughts below. I can't wait to read them. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching. Please like and share this video if you think someone else will like it. I'll see you next time. Honesty is the best policy. We all know this, but sometimes we tend to forget this simple rule, especially when it comes to making money. Once upon a time in a village, there lived a poor farmer who owned a few cows. Every morning he would get up early, milk the cows, and then take the milk to the nearby town to sell. With the money he earned, he would buy food for his family and the cows. He did this every day, and it was his only source of income. One day the farmer was exhausted. He was tired of getting up early and taking the milk to the town. As he was a very poor man, he thought to himself, if I add a little water to the milk and sell it, no one will notice. Then I can sleep a little more and earn some extra money. So the next morning he took out some water and mixed it into the milk and took it to the town. At first no one complained. They drank the milk and went about their daily activities. So the farmer was happy and thought to himself, I tricked them, no one knows, and I'm making extra money. So he started bringing more and more water every day, and slowly started to earn some extra money. However, 1 week later, one of the customers decided to boil the milk before drinking it. When the milk boiled, it became very thin and had no taste. The customer immediately knew that the milk had been mixed with water. Shouted, "Hey, you were cheating on us." Soon everyone in the town knew what the farmer was doing. The next day, the farmer went to the town to sell his milk, but no one bought it. They all scolded him and asked him to leave. The farmer had no option but to return home with an empty cart. As he looked at the empty cart, the farmer realized that he had lost everything in his greed to earn a little more. He said to himself, in trying to gain a little more, I have lost everything. So friends, this story teaches us that no matter how poor or rich we are, we should always be honest in our dealings. Cheating may seem like a good way to make quick money, but it destroys our honesty, and once our honesty is gone, we lose everything. Once upon a time, there was a rich man who wanted to teach his son the value of kindness. So he gave his son an empty glass jar and said, each time you do something kind, place a coin inside. The boy was a little confused, but he understood that his father wanted him to be kind. So he started with small things. One day he helped his mother carry water, and she gave him a coin to put in the jar. Another day he shared his food with a friend and received another coin. When he saw a child crying, he went to comfort her, and the child's mother gave him a coin for that too. Every time he did something nice, he got a coin. At first the coins seemed small, and the jar remained mostly empty. But months passed and the jar started getting heavy. One day the boy looked at the jar proudly and said, "Father, my jar is almost full." The father smiled and said, "Do you see? Kindness is like these coins. At first it seems small, almost invisible. But with time, every act adds up, and soon you carry a treasure greater than gold." The boy realized that the true wealth was not measured by money, but by the goodness he spread each day. From that day on, he continued to do kind things, and the jar continued to fill up. Many years passed, and the boy grew up to become a man. He never forgot the lesson his father had taught him. He understood that kindness was a treasure that would never lose its worth. So whenever you feel like doing something kind, remember the story of the boy and his jar. No act of kindness is too small. Every little thing you do makes the world a better place. And in the end, it's the kindness that will truly make you rich. The end. Once upon a time, deep in the heart of a village, there lived a very poor woman. She was so poor that she didn't even have enough money to buy food for herself. But one day she managed to save up a little money and went to the market to buy some rice. She bought a small pot of rice and carefully placed it on her head. Then she started walking towards her house. As she walked, her mind started to wander. She imagined all the things she could do with the rice. First she thought, I'll sell the rice, and with the money, I'll buy some chickens. And the chickens will lay eggs, and I'll sell the eggs and buy a cow. Then the cow will give me milk and I'll be rich. She smiled as she thought about how nice it would be to finally be rich. But as she was walking, she started to get a little cocky. No, she thought, I'm getting a little too old to be doing this. It's time for me to become rich. I don't want to be selling rice anymore. And that's when she stopped walking. She stood still for a moment and closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she was shocked to see that the pot had slipped from her head and fallen to the ground. The pot broke into pieces and the rice spilled everywhere. She stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. She looked at the rice scattered at her feet and realized that her dreams had broken along with the pot. She had been so focused on the future, on how she would become rich, that she had forgotten to take care of the present. She had let her mind wander so far that she had lost touch with reality. The woman burst out crying. She cried not only for the loss of her rice, but also for the loss of her dreams. And as the sun set over the horizon, the poor woman sat down on a nearby tree and started to cry. This is a sad story, but it has a good message. It tells us that we should never forget to focus on the step in front of us. No matter how big our dreams are, it's important to take care of what we have now. Otherwise, we may end up losing even that. The woman in the story wanted to become rich, but she lost sight of the present moment and ended up with nothing. Let this story be a reminder for us all that great success is built not only on dreams and plans, but also on careful action today. If we want to achieve our goals, we must pay attention to the step in front of us and not get distracted by the dreams of the future. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a wealthy man who had everything one could desire. One evening, he was invited to a banquet in the king's palace and happily accepted the invitation. The banquet was a grand affair with delicious food and fine wine. The wealthy man ate and drank to his heart's content. After a while, he excused himself and went to the restroom. As he was in a hurry, he accidentally forgot his old, worn-out shoes under the table. The servants who were cleaning the room saw the shoes and started laughing. "Why would a rich man like him still wear such shabby shoes?" they said. The wealthy man heard their laughter and calmly replied, "These shoes carried me through years of hard work when I was poor. They remind me where I came from. If I throw them away, just because I have new ones, I might forget the path that brought me here." The servants fell silent. They realized that true wealth was not just about having new and expensive things, but also about remembering the value of old lessons. From that day on, the servants treated the wealthy man with even more respect. And the wealthy man continued to live a humble and grateful life, always remembering the journey that brought him success. This story is an example of how important it is to be grateful for what we have and where we come from. No matter how successful we become, we should never forget the struggles we faced or the people who helped us along the way. It's easy to forget our roots when we start making money. We might think that we read better than everyone else, or that we do and need the people who helped us when we were poor. But the truth is, our past makes us who we are today. And if we're not grateful for our past, we're not really grateful for our lives. The wealthy man in this story could have easily dismissed the servants' comments and forgotten about them. But instead, he took the opportunity to teach them a valuable lesson about humility and gratitude. He didn't just have the right answer, he was calm and respectful. Even though he was the one who was being laughed at, he didn't get angry or defensive. Instead, he showed the servants that true wealth is not just about having money, but also about having a grateful heart. So the next time you're feeling ungrateful or unappreciated, remember the story of the wealthy man and his shoes. And remember that no matter how successful you become, it's important to stay humble and grateful for everything you have. Once upon a time, there was a young man who lived in a house with his father. He wanted to go to the roof to fix a leak, but he couldn't find a ladder. So he went out into the yard to look for one. He found an old ladder, but the first few steps were cracked and broken. Thinking that it would take too long to repair them, he decided to climb up quickly. But halfway up, one of the broken steps snapped beneath his foot, and he nearly fell. Frightened, he rushed back down the ladder to safety and angrily complained, "This ladder is useless. It can't even help me to reach the roof." An old neighbor who had been watching from his porch shook his head and said, "The ladder is not useless. You are wrong. The ladder is not useless. You've just ignored its broken steps.
No.
If you fix what is weak, the ladder will carry you safely to the top. The young man thought about his neighbor's words. He realized that he had been too impatient to fix the ladder. He should have taken the time to make it safe before trying to climb it. So he went back to the ladder and carefully fixed each step one by one. After he had repaired all the steps, he climbed up the ladder to the roof. This time he felt much safer because he knew that he had fixed the broken steps. He was able to successfully fix the leak in the roof. When he came down the ladder, he thanked his neighbor and said, "You were right. I shouldn't have tried to rush the job. Should have taken the time to do it properly." The old man smiled and said, "Sometimes it is better to go slowly and fix what is weak than to rush ahead and risk falling. If you want to climb high, you must start with a strong foundation." The young man learned a valuable lesson that day. He realized that it was important to fix the small things in life and not just focus on the big goals. He understood that if he wanted to achieve great things, he had to start with a solid foundation. Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, there was a cook who had a brand new knife. It was a very sharp knife, and he was so proud of it. He would use it for everything. He'd use it to cut the meat and chop wood and even open cans. At first, the knife worked very well, but soon its blade became dull and chipped. And when the cook tried to slice some vegetables, the knife could no longer cut cleanly. It would just slip and slide on the vegetables, and the cook became so frustrated that he shouted, "This knife is useless." Now, an old and wise cook was nearby and heard what the young cook had said. So he walked over and put a hand on the young cook's shoulder. "My young friend," he said, "the knife is not useless. We're simply using it the wrong way. Every tool has its purpose, and if you respect its purpose, it will serve you well for a long time. But if you misuse it, even the best tool will break." The young cook was confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. The old cook explained. "You bought this knife because its purpose was to cut, right? So use it only for cutting. For other things, there are other tools. You see, this knife is meant to cut soft things like vegetables and meat. It's not meant to hack and chop hard things like wood. For that, you need an axe. And for opening cans, you need a can opener." Each tool has its own purpose, and if you use them for what they were made for, they will last a long time. But if you don't, they will break, no matter how sharp or strong they are. The young cook understood what the old cook meant. From that day on, he took better care of all his tools. He used the axe for wood and the can opener for cans, and the knife for cutting vegetables and meat, and everything went smoothly. He even began to enjoy his work again, because he was using each tool for what it was meant for. So the story of the cook and the knife teaches us that we should respect the purpose of things, whether they are tools or people. Every person is created for a purpose. We all have our own unique gifts and talents that make us special. And when we are placed where we fit best, we shine. But when we are misused, even our greatest strengths can be wasted. So it's important to understand our purpose and to respect the purposes of others. When we do, we can all work together and accomplish great things. Once upon a time, there were two farmers who lived in fields that were next to each other. The first farmer was a very hard-working man. Every morning, as soon as the sun came up, he would start plowing his land. After that, he would take his big, strong hands and water his crops. He did this every single day. Now, the other farmer was a very lazy man. He would sit in the shade all day long and watch his neighbor working hard. He would just say to himself, "Why does he have to work so much? I will wait for the rain, then I'll work." The whole summer, the sky was dry. There wasn't a single drop of rain. But the first farmer didn't complain. Every day he carried buckets of water from the river and watered his crops. Slowly, his plants grew strong and gave lots of fruits and vegetables. The lazy farmer's field, however, was completely barren because he didn't do anything. One day, he saw that his neighbor had a big harvest and he was very hungry. So he went to his neighbor's field and said, "Please give me some of your harvest." The first farmer looked at him and sighed, then said, "Of course I will share with you. But remember, if you want a field full of crops tomorrow, you must start working today. Rain may come or not, but effort always bears fruit." The lazy farmer felt ashamed when he heard these words, but he was too hungry to listen. He took the food and went home. Not one to learn from his mistakes, the lazy farmer waited for the rain to fall, but it never did. Day after day, his field remained barren, while the other farmer's field was full of crops. So friends, what did the lazy farmer do at the end? What lesson did he learn? This story teaches us that we must work hard if we want to be successful. We can't just wait around and do nothing. If we want a good harvest, we must plant seeds and water them. If we want to be healthy, we must exercise and eat well. If we want to be happy, we must make an effort. Nothing in life is free, and we must work hard if we want to achieve our goals. Fortune may help, but diligence never fails. So work hard, my friends, and you will succeed. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a wealthy man. He lived in a grand and beautiful house with high walls and a big clear glass window. One day, a wise visitor came to see him. The visitor was an expert in philosophy and had traveled all over the world to share his knowledge. As he sat down in the man's house, he looked around and then pointed to the window. "What do you see?" The man looked out the window and replied, "I see people walking in the street, children playing, and workers doing their jobs." Said the visitor. Then he took a small piece of silver and stuck it on the back of the glass. It's a thin layer so that the man could still see the people outside, but it turned into a mirror. So now the man could only see himself. "Well, sir," asked the visitor, "now what do you see?" The man turned to look at the visitor and said, "I see only myself." The visitor smiled and said nothing. But the man felt upset that he could only see himself and not the world outside. So he took the silver off the glass window, and again he could see everything clearly. After a while, the visitor got up to leave. The man felt confused and wanted to understand what the visitor had shown him. So he asked, "Why did you make me see only myself? What did you want to teach me?" The visitor said, "Look here, this is a piece of glass, right? It's useful. It lets you see the world outside. But if you put a thin layer of silver on it, it becomes a mirror, and all you can see is yourself." The same happens when a person has a lot of money. Money is like a piece of glass. It's useful to have, but if you let it cover your heart, it becomes a mirror, and all you can see is yourself. You forget about others and their feelings. You become selfish and greedy. True richness is not in the money or the silver, but in remembering to see beyond ourselves. The man thought about these words as he watched the visitor leave. He realized that he had been so focused on his own life and wealth that he had forgotten to help others. From that day on, he started to use his wealth to make a difference in the world. He helped build schools for poor children and donated food and clothes to those who needed them. And as he did these kind acts, he felt a sense of happiness and fulfillment that he had never felt before. So remember, no matter how much money you have, always keep a little space in your heart to see the world and the people around you. Because true richness is not about being rich, but about being kind and helpful to others. One evening, a candle was lit in a dark room. It stood proudly saying, "See how I chase away the darkness? Without me, the world would be lost." Then the next morning, the sun rose. Its light flooded the room, and the tiny flame of the candle looked weak, ashamed. The candle whispered, "I am nothing compared to the sun." But the sun said gently, "Do not be sad, little candle. At night when I cannot shine here, your small light guides people. You do not need to be me. Even a little light can make a difference in the dark." The candle felt warm inside, realizing it still had meaning. The story of the candle and the sun is a beautiful one, isn't it? There's a lot that we can learn from it. So let's see what the meaning of this story is. We often compare ourselves with others and feel bad about ourselves. Why can't I be strong like the sun? Why can't I be beautiful like her? Or why can't I be rich like him? We often envy others and feel that our life is meaningless. But this story tells us that each one of us is unique and has a purpose. Candle and the sun are very different, yet they both give light. The sun gives light during the day, and the candle at night. They may be different, but they both have one goal: to give light and chase away the darkness. In their own little ways, they both make a difference. See, friends, we all have different abilities, and we should use them to make the world a better place. The story also teaches us to be kind and helpful to others. The sun could have ignored the candle or made fun of it, but instead it chose to be kind and tell the candle its importance. Similarly, we should be kind to others and help them to realize their importance. You might be going through a tough time right now, but remember, even a small light can make a big difference in someone's life. Your kindness and love can be a guiding light for someone who is lost in darkness. So never give up, my friend. Keep trying, and you will make the world a better place. Now, I want to ask you a question. What kind of light do you want to be in the world? Are you going to be a source of happiness and positivity, or anger and hatred? The choice is yours, my friend. Choose wisely. If you liked this story, give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Also, subscribe for more such wonderful stories. Thank you for watching. Every morning, a young man took the same bus to work. Every morning, the bus was so crowded that when he got on, he would have to push his way through the crowd to get to the front. And if he was lucky enough to find a seat, it was only to get up in a few minutes when someone else needed it more. So he always got off at his stop, angry and annoyed. One day, as he was getting onto the bus, he saw an old woman slowly stepping onto the bus. He looked back to see if there were any seats left, and there was only one seat left in the front. The young man rushed towards the seat, but as he turned back, he saw the old woman struggling to stand. For the first time, he stepped aside and offered her the seat. The old woman smiled and said, "Thank you, son. My legs are weak, but your kindness makes my journey lighter." The young man blushed and smiled back. He stood for the rest of the ride, but strangely he felt more comfortable than on the days he sat down. After a few days, he saw the same old woman struggling to stand up from her seat. This time he rushed to help her and said, "Let me get some water for you." She stopped him with a smile and said, "No need, son. It is enough if you just stand up when you see someone who needs the seat more than you do." As the young man stood there pondering what she meant, she continued, "You know, when we take things that don't belong to us, we feel guilty. And when we help someone in need, we feel good about ourselves. These feelings, son, they stay with us much longer than any material comfort we might get." The young man thought about what she had said. He realized that helping others made him feel much better than taking what others needed. From that day on, whenever he saw someone on the bus who needed the seat more than he did, he stood up and offered them his seat. And strangely enough, he never felt more comfortable than when he was standing up. Meaning, this story teaches us that true comfort does not always come from taking, but from giving. A small act of kindness can make our own journey lighter, even when we stand instead of sit. Once upon a time, a young man went to see his teacher. He was upset and frustrated. "Everyone treats me coldly," he said. "People are unfriendly and harsh. They don't care about me. I feel like giving up." The teacher listened patiently and then asked, "Do you remember the last time you looked into a mirror?" The young man thought for a moment. "Yes, I do. Why do you ask?" he replied. "I want you to look into this," the teacher said, leading him to a large mirror covered in dust. The young man looked into it but saw only a blurry, distorted version of himself staring back. He wiped the surface with his hand and his reflection became clearer. Then the teacher handed him a cloth and said, "Let's make it a bit cleaner." As the young man cleaned the mirror more carefully, his face shone clearly back at him. The teacher said softly, "People are like mirrors. If your own heart is covered in dust, anger, pride, or bitterness, then the world will reflect the same. But if you keep your heart clean with kindness and respect, you will see warmth reflected back." The young man thought about these words. He realized that the coldness he felt from others might have been his own attitude towards them. Maybe he had been too quick to judge, to be kind. From that day on, he made a conscious effort to treat everyone with warmth and respect. And guess what? He started seeing the same kindness and warmth in return. The young man understood that the world doesn't always give us what we think we deserve, but what we are willing to give. We can choose to see the best in others, because deep down, they are all mirrors reflecting our own light. So remember, friends, the next time you look into a mirror, wipe it clean not only with a cloth, but also with the purity of your heart. Let kindness be your guide, and you will see how the world transforms into a beautiful reflection of your own soul. That's all for today. See you next time. One morning, a man went to a small shop to buy a cup of coffee. As he sipped the hot beverage, his face fell. "Oh, this coffee is so bitter," he muttered. "What a terrible day this will be," he said with a heavy sigh. At the next table sat another man. He, too, had ordered the same coffee. But as he sipped it slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Yes, it is bitter," he said, "but the warmth feels good in my hands, and it wakes me up for the day." The first man looked at him in surprise. "How can you be happy?" he asked. "The coffee is the same for both of us. It's clear that yours is just as bitter as mine." The second man smiled again. "Life is like this cup of coffee," he said. "The bitterness is real, But whether we suffer or find joy in it all depends on how we choose to taste it. A positive mind will find warmth even in a bitter cup, but a negative mind will find no sweetness in it at all. The first man was deeply moved by these words. He realized that he had allowed his circumstances to dictate his mood, and that's not the way to live. From that day forward, he made a conscious effort to look for the good in every situation, no matter how difficult it might seem. Friends, the truth is that life is full of ups and downs. There will be times when things are going well for us, and there will be times when we face challenges and hardships. But it's up to us to decide how we will react to these situations. Will we choose to see the good, or will we focus on the bad? The choice is ours. The story teaches us that we have the power to shape our own happiness. So whenever you find yourself in a difficult situation, remember the words of the wise old man. Find the good in the situation, and you will find happiness. Ignore the good and focus only on the bad, and you will only make your situation worse. So friends, always try to see the good in every situation, no matter how difficult it may seem, and always remember that a positive mind can find happiness in any circumstance. So friends, what did you learn from this story? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this story, please hit the like button. Thank you for watching this video. See you soon in our next video.